Here we come, the dirt road in Alaska.
Anyway, once we get going here, I'll explain some things to you about good old Skagway. There's a lot to be known about this town. Skagway is only 4 blocks wide and 21 blocks long, folks. And that's all it ever was, and that's all it ever will be. Because there's mountains on each side.
Yeah.
So there can't be any expansion here.
Is it the downtown over here?
Yep.
This is downtown. Here, this first building here on the right, the brown one here, that is the Park Service Information Center. And they have a video, they have a 20-minute video in there of the gold rush, and it's complete. Now, you folks that are on the Millennium have to be back so early, you're probably not going to be able to enjoy that. But the rest of you folks can. This is the Klondike Gold Rush National Historic Park. That does not mean the whole city is a park. It's one of the few non-gated parks in the United States of America. The Park Service owns bits and pieces of this town. They own some of the stores on Broadway. You didn't know the U.S. government was in the retail business, but by the way, they are here.
Wow.
The railroad, there wasn't a road into Skagway until 1978.
Wow.
Okay, the railroad ran, I don't know what this is about. Deer in headlights, I guess. The railroad ran between 1900 when it first opened up till 1981 when it shut down. Now, the reason the railroad shut down some of it had to do with the road coming in here in 1978. But what really finished it off was the mining shut down in the Yukon in 1981. And so the railroad closed. When the railroad closed here, Skagway became a ghost town. You could have bought every building on Broadway and Main Street for the taxes against them. And if you'd have done that and had any money, which none of us did in the 1980s, you could have made yourself a very, very wealthy person. Because the 5-month lease on some of these buildings downtown is as high as $300,000 for 5 months. Everything is expensive here in Skagway for all of us. And as we get up the road here today, I'll explain some more of that to you. This may look like civilization to you folks, but come back in the fall of the year and I'll show you what cabin fever is all about. In the winter, only 4. We have 1.5 restaurants. Now you wonder why I say a half, because the other one's only open half the time. We got 1 gas station and we got 1 hardware store. We have 1 grocery store, which you probably don't want to hear what I think about that one. But we do not get any truck delivery of goods and services in this community. Everything comes here by barge once a week from Seattle, Washington. And so it's very, very expensive to live here. That includes our groceries. We only have 1 grocery store. And by the way, a well-stocked mini mart in Lower 48 has a better selection than this grocery store does. So when we have the opportunity, we shop in Canada, Whitehorse, Yukon. Now Whitehorse, Yukon is 120 miles from here, and it is the capital of the Yukon. All right, there are 3 docks here in Skagway. Skagway is a natural deep water port. That port is 2,000 feet deep right off the side of your ship. And that is the gold in Skagway, that port. And if it wasn't for that, you folks wouldn't be able to get here with your ships. Now there also is talk about building another dock. There's 1 million people supposedly this summer just off the cruise ships, folks like yourself. In 2 years, by 2020, they claim there's going to be 300,000 more. There'll be a third more than what there is here today. Those of us that live here, we don't know what we're going to do with everybody because Skagway, once again, is only 4 blocks wide and 21 blocks long, folks. The biggest problem in Skagway is housing, the lack of it. There will be no new housing additions in this town. There is no more room. So in the summertime, we get a huge influx of young people come up here to work in the tourist industry. Their issue is finding a place to live. Most of these companies, if they're going to hire anybody, they have to provide housing. And that is extremely difficult and extremely expensive. Now, while we're here on Broadway, I'm going to take a short trip down Broadway to give you a little bit of an overview of Skagway. A lot of these buildings here in this town are Gold Rush era, and they've been moved. Nobody threw anything away back in the day. The Red Onion Saloon, it's been moved. It's not in its original place. Here on our left, if you take a look, this building with the driftwood on the front of it, that's the Arctic Brotherhood Hall. That's Gold Rush era 1899. That's an original. That is our Visitors Bureau. These 4 stores on your right are owned by the Park Service. This yellow building on the left is the Gold North Hotel. That's Gold Rush era too. It's no longer a hotel. It's a jewelry store, and I'm sure you folks haven't had any experience at jewelry stores on your trip. If you notice the different colors of all these buildings, we have what's called the historical district here that governs all that. Supposedly that's the way they were at the time of the gold rush. I don't know how they know because there was no colored film at the time, but we call it the historical district. That building I just passed on the corner there is our local hardware store. That's been owned by the same family since before World War II, and that's open year-round. Most of us live out of that hardware store. We have some things and nothing of others here in Skagway, and I'll explain the nothing of others. We actually have a Wells Fargo bank here on the corner. You probably wonder why Craig's talking about a bank. Well, it's kind of a big deal. We got one. And right next to it is our post office. Broadway and 7th is the far north end of the shopping district here. What you won't see here in Skagway is any graffiti or any garbage. The people that live here take great pride in this small community. Now, housing being what it is, the lack of, there hasn't been a home sold in this community under $200,000 for the last 10 years, and some of them don't even have foundations under them. There never is a for sale sign on a piece of property in this town because it exchanges hands amongst friends and family. I have a brother-in-law that's a real estate agent, the only one here, and he's not very busy. Skagway is a small town, always has been, so if any of you folks are familiar with small communities, you'll understand, well, everybody knows everybody and everything about everybody.
Wow.
There are no secrets in this town. And a good share of the population is related at one time or another. There are no year-round jobs in this town available. What few there are spoken for. They're not available to anybody outside of here. If you understand the term nepotism, you'll know what I'm talking about. One relative moves out of a job, another one moves right in behind it. So when young people come up here in the summer for a job, they have visions of sugar plums dancing in their head. They're bringing a tent with them, so they're going to live cheap, and they're going to make a lot of money. Well, once they get here, reality sets in, and they find out it costs them $500 a month to pitch a tent here in this town. And then if they're down at the Red Onion drinking beer in the summer, usually their parents have to send them money to get them out of here in the fall. Now, in the last 6-7 years, we've had young families moving in here, which is very good. It revitalizes this community, and this community can stand some revitalizing. How they're managing to do this is a mystery to us that live here because Skagway is strictly a 5-month town. There are no income jobs available for 7 months in the winter, and housing is extremely expensive. On our left here is our school. That's the nicest facility in this town. It's K through 12. There's approximately 100 students there, and last year's graduating class was 5. I'm not pulling your leg, it was 5. On the right here is an RV park, one of the only 2 in town, and all the trailers you see around that perimeter of that's all seasonal housing.
What the renting of those RVs?
They're $45 a night.
Oh.
A night. And the city now owns both the 2 RV parks. I owned one of them previously, that for 12 years down at the boat harbor. But today the city owns them both and the city runs them both. So you can't negotiate any price on overnight stays here. Skagway is one of the most picturesque towns. We have glaciers, we have harbors. Coming up here straight ahead of us is the railroad yards where they work and store the locomotives and the parlor cars. This railroad is Canadian owned and run by Americans. And these people that work here are union. They go to work 1 month before the first cruise ship, which is the first week of May. They work a month after the last cruise ship, which is the last week of September. But it's changing. The railroad was for sale and it's been sold. Carnival Cruise Lines just bought this railroad, and that sale is finalized the end of next month. So Skagway is official. Skagway is going to be a cruise ship town. Now on the right here is the Skagway River. You probably wonder, why is Craig talking about the Skagway River? Well, it's kind of interesting because there's only 12 miles of runoff that feeds that river. It never runs dry. We are at sea level here, obviously. 12 miles up the hill is the summit. We go from sea level to 3,300 feet in just 12 miles. At the summit is the Canadian border. I assume everybody's got your passports, right?
Yes.
All right, I hope so. We're going to need it. At the summit is where the watershed splits. From there on, water runs north. So there's only 12 miles runoff that feeds that river, and it's all glacier and snow runoff that keeps that going like that. There's a tremendous amount of water here in the north. Water is the gold of the north these days. We have enough water here in the north to supply Arizona, Nevada, and California for generations, and we wouldn't even miss it.
Wow.
And water quality is
excellent.
The best.
Yeah.
Is everybody warm enough?
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, good. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
It's too warm here.
Yeah, okay.
This what?
Too warm.
I'll cool it off. Be careful what you wish for. We do have windows up above there. You can just like snap and move out if you want. Anyway, there's 2 big construction companies in this town, and you might wonder, how can 2 big construction companies survive in a small community like this? One of them primarily works for does railroad work on the roadbed, and the other one does other construction work basically all over Alaska. But I'm going to show you up the road here, we're replacing a bridge. They're building a bridge right alongside the current one. You can't shut this road down. This road is a lifeline between here and the Alcan Highway and Whitehorse, Yukon. We can't drive out of Skagway to anywhere in the lower 48. It's 1,700 miles from Skagway to Seattle. It's 840 miles from Skagway to Anchorage, Alaska. This road is kept open year-round, and the reason that it is because there is a copper mine north of Whitehorse, Yukon, that they bring ore to a terminal down here. You folks that are on the Millennium, that is an ore dock. And so they bring copper ore into there. There's ore ships from all over the world come in there and pull the ore out of there, and that's year-round. Also, there's a fuel tank farm. In that fuel tank farm, there's 1.2 million gallons of fuel comes into that tank farm every month from Anacortes, Washington. Now you might wonder who's using all the fuel, because the cruise ships don't buy fuel here. Well, who's buying all the fuel? There's four double tankers, fuel tankers, twice a day, every day, year-round, from Whitehorse, Yukon, that comes down here and pulls fuel out of here to help supply Whitehorse, Yukon. So you can kind of get an idea of the value of that boat harbor. That is the gold of Skagway. I can give you a brief overview of the gold rush here. First of all, don't ever believe that there was ever any gold in Skagway. There has never been any gold in Skagway, Alaska. The only gold in Skagway, Alaska was a guy by the name of Soapy Smith who stole everything from everybody headed to the gold fields. That was all there was. Now, it was easy for those people to get here because they rode a ship in here, just like you did. But once they got here, it became extremely difficult. There's two trails over the summit here into Canada. One was the White Pass Trail. It was longer but more gradual. The preferred one was the Chilkoot Trail, which was in a community that existed at the time called Dyea. That was shorter, but it was more steep. Well, when the people headed to the gold fields, hiked the trail, they had a surprise waiting for them at the border. It's called the Northwest Mounted Police. I'm going to change the subject. You see these bicycles here on the road here? Do you know what side they're on?
What do you mean?
On the left side.
Suicide.
That's right.
I'm not pulling your leg. You check this road out as we go up the hill. There's signs up here that says share the road with a bicycle. I'd like to know what road they're sharing. There's no extra here. Anyway, at the time of the gold rush, once these guys headed to the gold fields, by the way, where the gold fields are 450 miles north of Skagway. They had a long ways to go. The Mounties were waiting for them. And Canada had a law that said they wouldn't allow anybody into their country unless they had 1,000 pounds of provisions. They didn't want people coming into Canada and starving to death in their country. Well, so some of these people had to hike the trail 5 and 6 times. It was a huge hardship. Once those that got it done, they hiked over into a place called Lake Bennett. And that's where they spent the winter. Obviously, there's ice on the lake. They built their boats there in the wintertime, and then once the ice went out, they floated their boats on Lake Bennett through a chain of lakes in the Yukon River and north to Dawson, which is another 400 miles by water. So it was hardship. Very, very difficult. There's 3 cemeteries here. The Gold Rush Cemetery, another cemetery called the Slide Cemetery, which 200 people died in an avalanche in 1899 in one day. And then there's a current cemetery, which, by the way, I'm not in any hurry to get into. On the right-hand side of us here is the railroad right-of-way. You get glimpses of that. You'll see that how that was created is basically they just dynamited the side of the mountain off to create a roadbed for the railway. And that's the reason that the rail is not narrow gauge and still is, by the way. There's not enough room for standard gauge. I want to point this out to you on the right. Here's Skagway's leading tourist attraction. That is our dump. We do not have enough land here for a landfill, so we have an incinerator. Skagway's no different than any other small community. It generates a lot of scrap. We cannot, under any circumstances, haul anything into Canada, and Canada's only 12 miles away. So every 2 years we have a scrap barge that comes in here and hauls scrap out of here and cleans the town up, and we start all over again. Now we're going to be coming up on U.S. Customs here. We're not stopping here on the way up, but we will have to stop on the way back. U.S. Customs is only 6 miles out of town. Canadian Customs is 20 miles out of town. So there's 14 miles of no man's land here. And once you'll see it, you'll understand why nothing's ever been built here, simply because of the terrain. It's not possible. Once again, this whole area is uninhabited. There's nobody living here. This is U.S. Customs. It's a fairly new facility. It's probably in the last 20 years. These people that work here, the customs people, they live in towns. So they know everybody and everything about everybody. We get just past this building here, look to the left, and I wonder if anybody can tell me what all these yellow posts are. Anybody got any ideas?
Scan. X-rays.
X-ray. He's a smart fella. That's not normal at most border crossings, but they installed that there about 5 years ago because of the huge amount of bus traffic in and out of Skagway every day. They know everything in the vehicle. They know how many people are in the vehicle, and they take your picture 6 times before you get up to the booth. I'm going to stop up here. There's a pull-out up here. I'm going to show you something that pertains to Skagway, believe it or not. Okay, I'll quit gassing it up here. We'll have a minute for picture taking if you're interested. I'll explain before I'm going to turn you loose here. Anybody notice that pipe there on the side of that mountain on the right?
Oil.
Okay.
Yes.
That pipe's full of water.
Ooh.
You see that waterfall to the left of it?
Yeah.
Okay, that waterfall is regulated. It regulates the water in that pipe. So there's a constant flow of water in that pipe. That pipe is 4 feet in diameter, and it powers an electrical turbine down here in the bottom of this canyon. Okay, that's what provides Skagway with its electricity in the summertime. All right, when that freezes up in the winter, Skagway goes on generator. Now, I don't know whether any of you folks pay attention to your kilowatt hour per charge on your electrical bill, but I lived and worked in California for a long time, and the highest I've ever heard is 12 cents a kilowatt hour. We pay 26 cents. So we don't heat with electricity, I can assure you.
These mountains are rocks.
This is all solid granite.
Oh, granite.
It's
Oh,
all solid granite.
wow.
If you notice here, the tree line here is only about 2,500 feet. In the lower 48 in the mountains, the tree line is usually at 6,500 to 7,500 feet. The climate here has something to do with this, and I'll explain that. We're at sea level in Skagway. We only have 26 inches of moisture year-round. It might snow only 2-3 times in the winter in Skagway. Our average year-round winter temperature is 20s at night, 30s, 40s during the day. It is warmer in Skagway in the wintertime than it is in a lot of places in the lower 48.
Right.
But here at the summit, just 12 miles away, there can be 10 to 12 feet of snow. If you notice these markers here alongside the road, the reason they're there is so the snow removal people can tell where the side of the road is. There's that much snow stacks up here. And for sure, they don't want to go over on the other side of that guardrail because it's about 300 feet below to the bottom. At the summit is the Arctic climate. When the ocean climate and the Arctic climate gets together, there can be 100-mile-an-hour winds up here. stops going up the road here, what I'm going to try to do is, if there's crowds, well, I'm trying to stay out of the crowds here today. I hope you folks don't mind.
No, we don't mind.
I'm sure you've probably been involved in quite a few. But if there's nobody at some of these spots, I'll stop on the way up. If there's not, we'll catch them on the way back. I don't know what all these red flags are here because they just put those up yesterday. But there is a waterfall up here that will just give you a small indication of how much water there is here. This waterfall is called Bridal Veil Falls. And by the way, that water is drinkable.
Oh, really?
It's
This is the purest water I get.
It is.
It's coming from the glaciers, right?
Yep. Here in the north, a good share of the water supplies and lakes and stuff are not contaminated. Everything's made out of rock here, as you can see. We have earthquakes here from time to time. Last August, we had 2 of them within 2 hours apart. At 4:30 in the morning, we had a 6.7.
Wow.
2 hours later, at 6:30, we had a 5.4, and we had aftershocks all day long.
Wow.
The epicenter was 65 miles from here, and it shook everything in Skagway, but with no visible damage. Now there was after effects because there were some big rocks that came down on one of the docks and shut the dock down for a while. Now in Whitehorse, Yukon, which is 120 miles from here, it shook everything so hard that it shut down their electrical grid.
Wow.
So those things happen here. Mother Nature, it's not nice to fool with Mother Nature. She controls a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
But she gets mad at us once in a while.
We must behave.
We gotta behave, that's right. Now we couldn't get up around the corner here. This is where they're replacing this bridge. Now, basically what they're doing is they've taken down the side of a mountain. This is some of the contraband off that mountain. Last summer they dynamited every other day all summer long just to make that part happen. Now the people that are doing this is a local construction company from Skagway. Now they're very skilled. Everything that happens here is extremely dangerous and extremely expensive here. The bridge that they're replacing is the only single-span suspension bridge in the north. It's a suspension bridge. And if you look real close, when we're on it, don't get scared, it's got a bow in the center of it. So it's been deteriorating. In the middle of this current bridge is 300 feet to the bottom of that canyon. And on the left here, that mountain that was taken down was clear over here on the other side of this road. Now I can assure you, these people working here don't work for $10 an hour, folks. They're going to build that bridge up from the bottom of the canyon, if you can imagine that. Now, I don't make any guarantees about seeing any wildlife sightings, but we have been seeing bears from time to time going up the road here. The closer we get to the summit here, you'll notice the trees appear to be stunted. And they are. And it's just because of the heavy snow load up here. Once again, there can be 10 to 12 feet of snow up there in this area. If you notice some of the moss on these rocks here along the side of the mountain, that's called lichen. I don't mean to make a joke of it, but I don't know what it's likened to be honest with you. That's what it's called. Now we don't usually see much wildlife up here simply because there really is no food source. The only thing we see here is a bear rarely, and there are marmot here, which basically a marmot is nothing more than a fairly large mountain rat. That building on the side there, that's where they keep the snow removal equipment. The local Department of Transportation here only has this 12 miles of road to maintain. And you should hear them complain. But I guess that's pretty typical everywhere.
Yeah.
Pretty lucky today. I don't know, probably wonder why Greg says we're lucky, but a lot of times here, because the two different weather patterns that get together up here, the fog can be so heavy in here you can't even see in front of the vehicle. But it's fairly clear here today.
Could we be the wind today down there in the dock area?
Yeah.
Does it always wind like that?
Yeah, usually it is windy in Skagway. Skagway is an Indian name for home of the north wind. So it's pretty typical. Now, does any of you folks know what the Alaska state bird is?
No.
Mosquito.
Huh?
Mosquito.
Mosquito. For real?
No.
Must be eagle then. It gotta be eagle.
That's eagle.
On one?
Yeah. But the key to staying away from mosquitoes in the north here is stick next to coastal communities. Usually there's a wind blowing and mosquito can't fly in a 5-mile-an-hour wind or more. So usually coastal communities don't have a bug problem. But the minute you go to the interior,
big time.
You're going to start encountering this. Now up ahead of us, once we get to the summit, there's a pull-out up here with a Welcome to Alaska sign. It's important we get up and get some pictures here.
Right, correct.
Now, there's a bunch of people there. We're going to catch that one on the way back.
Okay.
I try to avoid these crowds because there is such a thing with all the traffic and the popularity of stopping at this sign. It's called sign etiquette. Now, I've been in Alaska quite a while, so I don't adhere to a whole lot of etiquette. But I'll tell you the way it works before we get there if we have to get involved. There's other people there. We have to stand off to one side of the sign while the other folks stand off the other side of the sign so everybody can get their pictures rather than just take over the whole sign. So we'll see if anybody's there. Suicide. They sell that on the ship, but they don't tell them. Well, what they tell them is you don't have to pedal at all. It's just all downhill.
Yeah.
Well, they forget to tell you there's no roads to deal with, that's for sure.
Oh, another sign.
We got a few people here, but I'm going to pull over. We'll just, if they leave ahead of us, then we can take over the sign. If they're still there, we have to stay off to one side. And I'll explain to you, so just follow my lead.
Sure.
And it's a bunch of bicyclers, so we'll deal with that.
Hi, back there.
Where the road cuts through these rocks here, this is the Canadian border. We're going to be in British Columbia until we get to Canada Customs. Canada Customs is only 7 miles from here, 12 kilometers. If you look to the left here, up here a little ways, there's a waterfall that's called International Falls. This is where the watershed splits. The water from here on runs north. Now we're going to be coming up on a huge open expanse called the Tormented Valley. And the reason that it's called the Tormented Valley is because the trees all look like they're tormented. And that's because of the 10 to 12 foot of snow that packs in here in the wintertime. There is no summer recreation here. There is winter recreation because people snow machine all over this whole valley all winter long. You see all the rocks, there's enough snow that covers all this. Now one thing you'll see is a bunch of small lakes here. These actually are not lakes. They're potholes. They're not stream fed, they're glacier and snow runoff fed. They basically are collect basins for the snow run off the mountains. Then there are no fish in any of these lakes either. We're going to make one more stop before we get to Canada Customs so you can get some pictures and then we'll move on. Notice the green tint of the water in some of these? That indicates glacier silt.
It's a silt.
Also, by the way, since we left town, there is no cell phone service, and there won't be on our trip here today. Once we get into Canada, which we just entered, we enter a different time zone. This is Pacific time zone, the same as California. But our clocks won't change because we got to operate on Alaska time because that's what your ships operate on.
Right.
We're about 3 miles from Canada Customs here. Here's how it works. They're going to come on the vehicle here. You hold your passport up. Show them your picture. Okay. Take your glasses off. You cannot wear your glasses. And then they'll welcome us to the land of milk and honey. I have to give them a list of how many people we have here. For your information here, this is as far as the trains go, right here at Fraser, the red building. They turn around, they go back to town. This facility here they provide housing for these people that work at customs, but you see the lights on here, there is no electricity here. This is all run on, this whole facility is run on generator. They don't even come on here. They don't even want to see your passport.
Because we go back home, right?
Well, they know you've been checked a dozen times because you came on the cruise ship.
That's right.
All they ever do is check me. Outhouse facility up the road here, about 3-4 miles, and I'll stop. Now there are railroad tracks that continue on here that go to Carcross. They don't go on past Carcross, Yukon any longer, like they did before. They used to go all the way to Whitehorse. There is one train occasionally that goes past here to Carcross, but it doesn't run every day. high alpine climate here. Then basically it kind of looks like a moonscape. And then we'll get into where it's kind of rodent trees, a lot of timber and stuff.
That's deep blue water.
Well, it's all fresh water, other than the glacier silt. Some of it. It's an outhouse. It's called a primitive toilet. I make no guarantees here, but this place is called Log Cabin. Now there was a number of log cabins here at one time, but they caught fire and burnt down, so they're gone forever. Now this is also used in the wintertime for recreation too, because they do headquarter cross-country skiing out of here. Now we're just about 8 miles east of Lake Bennett, where the Gold Rush people hike. Once we get up into this area here, there's bears, there's black and brown bear, there's moose, there's caribou, there's wolves, there's wolverine, there's lynx. Well, that doesn't mean they're going to come out the road to meet us, but those animals aren't here. The bears up in this area do not have the benefit of a fishing stream. So basically they're grazing animals. They dig roots. And usually in the spring of the year, when we start to see a lot of dandelions, then we know we're going to see a lot of bears. The bears just love dandelions. They get a buzz on with dandelions. You ever heard dandelion wine? They like that stuff. For a little bit here, it's just rodent trees. But we're going to come up on a lake. It's called Lake Tushai. And Lake Tushai is 60 miles long. That's 90 kilometers. And it just dumps into another chain of lakes. And this particular lake is 1,000 feet deep in some places. And there are fish in this one because it's stream fed. Plus glacier and snow runoff. I never, ever see any summer recreation on this lake. All last summer, I only saw 4 boats on it. Now, you folks from California know that if a huge body of water was in California, there'd be people and boats all over it, but not here. We actually got some blue sky here today. You folks want to know what us Alaskans call blue sky?
No.
Sucker holes. You don't believe it, it'll disappear.
Actually, today very beautiful day.
Oh, it's a fantastic day.
Yeah. We were at Ketchikan rain all day.
Well, there's 300 inches of moisture in Ketchikan. Yep. It's the rain capital of the world.
Yep.
This is the only commercial facility along this trip here today. It's called the Yukon Suspension Bridge. It's kind of a play on words because this is not the Yukon, it's British Columbia. It's just a bridge that goes across this river here. They want $20 for that little stroll, but we don't stop there. You can kind of get a glimpse of the river down here on the right in a couple places. This is also what helps feed this big chain of lakes here. Most of these trees, these pine trees you see here, are hemlock. In southeast Alaska, spruce is a major tree. Now, to my knowledge, there's never been a forest fire here in this area. There are a few spruce scattered throughout here, but not very much. There is a disease called the spruce beetle that kills the bark on a spruce tree, and it just devastates the whole forest. That hasn't happened in southeast Alaska either. But south of Anchorage, Alaska, on the Kenai Peninsula, pretty much that whole peninsula has been devastated, the spruce have. And the biggest concern is a forest fire. If it ever happens, it could easily clean out that whole peninsula. But that hasn't happened here because humans really haven't been here, and it's fairly untouched. At one time there was mining in this area, but the remnants of that are long since gone. Mining is the biggest thing here in the north. Oil is the biggest thing in Alaska, but the environmentalists have pretty much shut down any new oil exploration in Alaska. There's talk of some things changing, but that hasn't happened just yet. You're never supposed to talk about politics or religion in a bar or a bus, right? Right. I want to touch on politics just a little bit. Give you some history here. Years ago when Sarah Palin was our governor, she gave Trans-Canada, that's Canada Highway Commission, $500 million of our Alaska money to do a study to put a natural gas pipeline down the Alcan Highway to Alberta, to the tar sand oil fields. And right alongside of that pipeline was another pipeline, and that was an aqueduct. Now that's extremely smart, but the Canadians knew it would never happen, and the Alaskans knew it never happened because Sarah forgot one thing. The state of Alaska don't own the lease on the natural gas and oil. The oil companies do, and they weren't interested in doing that. So it never happened. But it was pretty wise to talk about an aqueduct, because that will happen someday. And no, we can't see Russia from the front porch of our house here.
What happened to the money?
Somehow, Trans-Canada used it all up.
Wow.
We never got any of it back. Now, I can touch a little bit on how things are in Alaska. I don't want to talk politically either. In Alaska, we have no state sales tax. Every community can levy its own. Skagway is 5%. But state tax, there's no state sales tax. There's no state income tax. And we have what's called a permanent fund. That's $1 billion that was invested 40 years ago. This oil money was invested in the stock market. Every October, every man, woman, and child in Alaska gets a royalty check. Everybody, man, women, and children. And it fluctuates because it's invested in the stock market. 15 years ago, Alaska was the richest state in the United States of America. It had $26 million in its checking account. For some reason today they can't meet their budget. Well, we have tax and spend politicians like everybody else does. But 10 years ago, the politicians tried to get their hands on that money. And they offered everybody in Alaska, every resident, is going to be a resident for 12 months, $25,000 buyout. It didn't fly. Alaskans didn't go for it. Well, 2 years ago, the governor that we have just arbitrarily took half of it. And so we sued him. But for some reason, it never went to court. And he did it again last year. So you folks that are fairly savvy about this stuff realize what that means. That sets precedent, and they're going to get it all. Now, enough of the doom and gloom. We're coming up on Lake Tushai. That is spelled T-U-T-S-H-I. And it's a fantastically beautiful place. Lake Tushai is one of only 3 lakes that are tied to each other, and they all end up into the Yukon River and go north to Dawson and empty into the Beaufort Sea. Once again, it's 60 miles long, 1,000 feet deep in some places, and there are fish in here. There's huge lake trout, Arctic char, and grayling. But all summer long, I only saw 4 boats on this lake all summer long. It is not used for recreation. Now there's only one place along this lake that we can drive down to and get access to it, and it's called a boat ramp. There is a place where they can launch boats. And I am going to stop there for a picture taker because there are some fantastic backdrops here. There actually is a small gold mine over on the other side of this lake, and it does freeze over solid in the wintertime. The story is there's a couple of trucks in the bottom of this lake. For recreation, but it's not. There's so much of that kind of stuff here in the north, especially in the Yukon. You've got a northern British Columbia. The Yukon is vast. It's a huge, huge territory. So there's quite a bit of this. There's only 32,000 people total live in Yukon. 22,000 of them live in Whitehorse, the capital. But believe it or not, Whitehorse is a full-blown community. They have everything. They have supermarkets. They even have a Walmart. That's why we go shopping there.
How often do you go?
Once a month.
Once a month. That makes sense.
We buy our groceries there. A lot of people do. Believe it or not, the prices in Whitehorse are cheaper. The retail prices are cheaper than they are in Skagway, and then there's the exchange on the dollar, of course, which fluctuates. He said, well, how do you know? I said, you weren't running. We can get up close and personal here. Pardon?
Well, right on the...
You see people from the U.S. right here.
Wow.
Yeah, there's car rentals. They follow the buses because they don't know where to go. They figure the buses know, so they follow us. I'm going to throw you to the dogs. I'm going to take you to the dogs. Okay. We're going to stop at Michelle Phillips' dog mushing camp here. Michelle Phillips has run the Iditarod 9 times. 2 years ago she finished 9th, and last year she finished 13th. Now that's a huge accomplishment. And the reason it's so huge, there's usually 75 to 80 dog teams that run the Iditarod. The Iditarod is 1,049 miles long.
Wow.
That's the first weekend of March. The winter usually finishes in just a little bit more than 9 days. Those dogs are, the winter, they're averaging 150 miles a day cross country, like that.
Winter chicken dinner.
And 3 weeks before the Iditarod, there's another dog sled race here in the Yukon called the Yukon Quest. That runs from Whitehorse, Yukon to Fairbanks, Alaska. The next year it reverses Fairbanks to Whitehorse, and that's 750 miles. Okay. Only twice in history, one guy won the Yukon Quest. 3 weeks later, with 9 of the same dogs, won the Iditarod, and he did it twice. That's 1,800 miles. 9 dogs. They start out with 16 dogs in a dog team. They never finish with 16 dogs.
Wow.
There's attrition there along the line. Now, the animal rights activists have been after the dog sled people for years, but they can't touch them. I'm going to tell you why. At every checkpoint throughout the whole race, the Iditarod, there's a total of 31 veterinarians at the checkpoints. If there's a problem with a dog, there's an airplane there. They put the dog on an airplane, and it's flown back to Anchorage to the veterinary hospital. If a musher is ever caught or seen abusing a dog, he's automatically barred for life. So they're serious about what they're doing. Now, make no mistake, these people aren't making money doing this. They claim that it takes about $75,000 investment to get to where you can run the Iditarod, and the reward is only about $75,000. So it's a lifestyle. That's the way these people are. They live for this. Some kennels have as many as 100 dogs. Now, you know what the food bill would be for that. And only the prominent winners of the Iditarod get the big sponsors. That helps them out. This gal here, she came out here and developed this about 4 years ago, and it helps her a great deal to fund her race. Now, she does charge admission here to get into where the puppies are. I'm going to pay that today for everybody, okay? Now, she does offer a dog sled ride, but that's about $45, and I don't think we're going to have time to do that part of it because I got to get you folks back by 3 o'clock. But anyway, what you're going to experience here is that you're going to get a true taste of the North. This is how these people are and how they live.
Thank you.
This drive, or this ride we're on here today, is titled one of the most spectacular in the North. We're going to get to see a good share of it. After a while, it just kind of becomes road and trees. We can get an idea how vast this is here. You're coming up on a building here on the left. There's a white door on this building. We walk through that building out into this fenced area here, and there's puppies there. Are these big, beautiful Alaskan Huskies. Nobody uses them. They're slow and they're aggressive. You can't have a dog fight in a dog team because then the party's over. These are basically mutts. They're bred to be athletes. They're usually only 45 to 55 pounds, believe it or not. Use that signage and I'll explain. Well, see her turn, I guess. No passports here. On our left here is our new fire department and police department.